All right, my name is Dan Stafford, and I have Andrea Sadler with me. We're two, I don't know if you call us Super Aquarians, Hyper Aquarians. We both have a Stellium in Aquarius. From the time we were born, there was a planet lineup in Aquarius. Now, for astrology purposes, the sun is a planet as well, so that's included. So it would be like, for the layperson, one planet and or six planets and the sun in Aquarius during the year we were born. In my case, it wasn't an exact lineup. I was a few days after it was exact, and that leaves me with five planets and the sun in Aquarius in my chart. And Andrea, I'm not sure without looking at your chart where you fall in that, but I think kind of somewhere close.
I know I have at least 6 planets. I thought I had 7 in Aquarius, but it might be 6. I was born on February 7th,
All right.
1962, in Ontario.
Right.
So,
And I'm the eighth in
oh,
Beloit,
okay.
Wisconsin, which is like 90 miles north of Chicago. Compared to the entire globe, we're not that far geographically separated or in
Uh-huh.
time, that matter.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I know I've got a total of six planets, but that includes the sun.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I didn't have a specific agenda for this. I thought we'd kind of freewheel it a little bit. So, do you want to tell me a little bit about like early life or what your interests are? I know you're into film
Well, I'm
or
very
some.
visual and very sensitive to sound and music. And my father was an artist. He was a sculptor and a painter. And my idea of a good time was drawing. I would draw for hours as a child because we didn't have television. So I played my guitar and I uh, drew incessantly, and I wrote in my journal since I was age 7. And I would play outside, and I was always trying to find a play. I always wanted to get lost in a forest. I've always been drawn to, the outdoors, and I was fortunate that our family's way of taking a vacation was going camping, so we had a lot of time outdoors doing that. And but I've always had a very active imagination, and I've been very drawn to, aliens and ghosts, and I was always very intuitive and um, sensitive, and my friends would kind of laugh at me because I would feel the presence of ghosts or spirits, and they just thought I was crazy. And so I kind of shut down that part of me, but I've remained an artist my whole life, and went into first acting and started in journalism, acting, modeling, and then switched to film production. And I'm still doing acting and film production, and I'm still, very sensitive to spirit energy. I've discovered in the last a couple of years ago, did a workshop with James Van Prague, and it was called Advanced Intuition. And I discovered I was able to channel spirits. So that was quite interesting because it came quite easily to me. Who knew?
That is interesting. I like that. I've been drawn towards shamanism
Yeah.
quite a bit over the last 10 years and shamanic journeying. And in the course of doing shamanic journeys, and I don't use like ayahuasca or any of those kind of like like anything that would alter your consciousness from a physical perspective. I use
Mhm.
drumming.
Oh,
Um,
drumming. Yeah, yeah.
there's a method for using drumming to do shamanic journeying, and
Hmm.
and there's no mind-altering drugs required for that. I mean, it's
Yes.
really a form of meditation.
Mhm.
is the best way I can describe it, that almost anyone can do if they're taught to do it. But you wind up talking to entities in these other versions of reality, what they call non-ordinary reality in
Mhm.
shamanism. So it's a very similar kind of thing to what you're talking to.
Yeah,
So,
I've I've always been drawn to the shamanic um, practices, and in my own journey, I guess around age 21. I mean, I feel like I've always been on a spiritual journey my whole life since I was a child. And even like at age maybe 11 or 12, just feeling like, well, everything is energy and energy is infinite. So a part of me never dies, you know? And, and I also was fortunate to go to Unitarian Church. So
oh,
we
that's cool.
learned, yeah, we learned about a lot of different, churches and ways of different religions, and it was we'd actually go to different places, and but it was kind of a cool church because we'd have sex education, we'd like camp out and watch the sunrise, and we'd have like folk music in our church service, and um, we could do things downstairs with the kids, or if we wanted to go upstairs where the adults were, we could. But they were like usually showing movies or having discussions about life and books and literature and movie. Like it was very cultural and intellectual, I guess. And so I was exposed to a lot of different religions, and was mainly interested in the spiritual truth
Now,
in the
was
center of the
was
cities.
that a straight Unitarian church or was it Unitarian Universalist?
Um, that's a good question. I was a child. To me, it was a Unitarian church. I
Okay.
didn't know whether it was Universalist or um, it was. I don't know.
Okay. Well, that might
Yeah.
be an interesting thing for you to look up later, too, whether or not, what the two of them are, because I know at one point, this is my understanding of it. Now, I could have it wrong because I've been told this rather than actually gone and researched and read it. Okay, but at one point there was a Universalist church and a Unitarian church, and then sometime in the last century, early in the last century, I think, the two of them became the Unitarian Universalist Church.
Oh, I
They
see.
basically merged. So it'd be hard pressed to say, but to me, from what I know, what I do know about the Unitarian Universalist Church is, to me, it reminds me of the Theosophical Society in a way, because the Theosophical Society, what their founding premise is, to the best of my understanding, is that they're trying to understand all faiths
Yes.
and in all religions and kind of get to the truth
Yeah.
through investigating pretty much everything.
Yes, and that's what I follow. And I don't like. I never. If someone says, "What religion are you?" I sometimes say the religion of love, or um, I don't. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. Um, Religion. What else do I say sometimes? Just I'm with the Church of Fun. Like I'm not really. I belong to the Church of Love and Fun.
Yeah, because that religion is kind of like a box.
Yes. We
can't,
Aquarians, we
can't quite
don't
get
think
it that.
about boxes.
No, no.
I was thinking about today, like just how, you know, um, since with the pandemic, I'm trying to adjust, financially to this new paradigm, and I'm trying to, recreate a business and market and do all that stuff that I have no real strength or desire to do, but I have to. But I was just thinking how I just can't, people say, well, get a job. And I'm like, I can't be in a box. I need to create my own work, and I need to create. my time and have my freedom, and even if it means, feast or famine, I've I've pretty much lived my whole life that way, with through a gig uh, economy, really.
Yeah, there's pretty much a capitalist globalist system, and then there's the human artistic way of living. And it's they're not the same shape or size. Yeah. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, we live in a system that's predominantly capitalist, and that means that we can't just go pursue it. I mean, unless you're a very lucky person, it's difficult to just go pursue artistic interests. I know I constantly have that battle between I want to go and be artistic over here, but I have to go make a living over here doing all my techie stuff, teaching IT and so forth. And that eats up so much of my time. So I'm very grateful for these Fridays with all of the rest of my tribe, these other Super Aquarians.
Yes. Well, I think it's important to carve out time because I know for me, like I'm from Canada, and um, I think artists, it's easier to be an artist there. Somehow there's more of a support system, and I was always able to earn my living getting grants and picking up. Well, I've been acting and modeling, so I paid my way acting and modeling and for years and working in the film industry. But then when I moved to the United States, I got married in 2006 and moved to New York State in the Hudson Valley. And suddenly I had to reinvent myself um, well, not, yeah, reinvent myself doing what I love, but not having the context that I had in Canada. So I kind of had
Mm.
to start over in in the US, and it's been a very different experience.
I would bet, it's I don't know how else to say it, but it seems to me like from what I've heard about Canada versus the United States, it's much more mercenary down here. I don't know
Oh,
how else to put it.
yeah, it's a it's very capitalist society. I mean, Canada is a capitalist model, but they have social values, and there's a social net in Canada, and for artists especially, it's well, I was just able, my expenses were lower, and I was able to just get by doing my projects and having like side jobs as well, right?
Right,
Um,
right, right.
but I knew the grant system, even though it wasn't easy, like it was very competitive, but I, was able to benefit from the grant system. Whereas here, I just, um, yeah, it's just starting all over and not having, there I can call up my friend, hey, how'd you get money for this documentary? And here I'm like, I'm not sure who to call, how to get funding in the United States. But
Mm.
I'm figuring it out. I joined the New York Women in Film and Television, and gosh, I wish I had done that years ago because I'm meeting so many amazing people. And then the pandemic hit, so I
Which
was
really did a fun number on like film and television and
oh yeah.
Broadway and all plays and anything theatrical whatsoever. Yeah, perfect timing. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I actually did a commercial for Pringles potato chips in May, and I played a crazed Canadian hockey fan.
That sounds fun.
They actually wanted an actress from Toronto, and I'm like, I have the paraphernalia, like I have the Canadian, cup and the hockey sticks and the whole bit. And then so I did that, and then I was fortunate to do a one woman show in at the Rockefeller State Preserve Park, um, is near Sleepy Hollow, and Bill and Hillary Clinton came to see my show, and there were only 25 people in the show sitting on stumps in a forest theater. Stumps socially spaced apart, and right in front of me was Bill and Hillary, and I told the story of a woman who lived 250 years ago in Sleepy Hollow. She had come. She had come from Czechoslovakia, Bohemia, and she was an indentured slave. And then she eventually made her way down, the Hudson River from, I believe it was Kinderhook. And she lived with the native people for quite some time. And then she lived on her own, but she was persecuted as a witch, and she was a herbalist. And she trapped and hunted animals and knew how to weave baskets and knew how to survive in the woods. So I told her story. I was asked to do her show this year, but the year before was the 250 year of her death, and she finally got a headstone. So she was buried at the old Dutch church with no headstone because the pastor Ritzima said she's a witch, so she doesn't deserve a headstone. And the year I did the show, they decided to give her a headstone. And being an intuitive person who can channel, apparently, and as an actress, I guess I channel as well. I felt her presence, and I felt so proud to tell her story, and I was so excited to have Hillary there because Hillary was so demonized, just as so many women who are empowered get demonized, right? Still,
Yeah, my mom would have totally been saying, "Yup, yup." Yeah,
was your mother a feminist or what?
she
What?
was. Yeah, she was. She passed in 2003. So
Oh,
it's been a while. So, but yeah, she there very much was, and I mean, from as long as I can remember, I mean, yeah, she was a feminist in the early '60s. I don't know
I
how
wish
else
I
to
could have
say
an
it.
Aquarian son like you.
Yeah. So, yeah, she would have been agreeing with you too, and yeah, I just wish it was all more even, Steven. Well, of course, that's the hyper Aquarian in me. I'm like, I want everybody to have a good life and a good time. Let's all
Me
be
too.
friends. Let's
And
all be friends.
I wonder if you experience this too. I'm an empath, and there's an expression, a highly sensitive person. Like now, it's a term, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like, oh, that's me. But part of it is that I feel so sad that people don't love each other more, and I just feel so sad that so many human beings don't see the value of nature and animals and clean water, and it just it just boggles my mind that we haven't evolved more by now.
What's interesting to me is I think we tend to, as we grow up, we tend to devolve, because little
God, I
kids
hope
don't
not.
have that.
I
Little
hope
kids
not.
are fascinated with animals. They look at other people just as other people. Okay. Oh, well, you look like that, but what, and, whatever. I don't remember as a little kid any of the little kids having any of these kind of attitudes. It's when they grow up, as in get taught this by other adults who have these attitudes, that comes, and I mean, it's one of the things that we're taught as children. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but we were talking about pollution in grade one, like so.
I
It's
don't
not
know
like
about grade
anything was
one, but it was pretty early on, and I was in Head Start, which is before. even kindergarten, and then kindergarten through um, half of fifth grade or so in public schools. And I remember learning about stuff like that. And then I went to a Catholic school from fifth grade to eighth grade, and they were teaching environmental stuff there, even in the Catholic
Really?
school,
That's amazing.
and then high school, I went to high school in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Madison, Wisconsin, especially when I was going to school in the 70s, it's kind of like Berkeley's little sister.
Mm,
It's a
cool.
very, very, very progressive city. Madison and Milwaukee are probably why Wisconsin was such a progressive state for so long.
Mm,
It's the more out of the city areas that are very much more conservative, traditional,
hmm.
Midwestern, you know. Um, but Madison in particular was extremely progressive, and I was going to an alternative high school for half a year or so there, and I was doing things like earth sciences and psychology and astronomy and like the basic courses
Wow.
in 10th grade. And so I remember being exposed to many of those different things. Now, I couldn't speak to education today. I mean, I've been out of the primary education system in the United States since I would have been in the class of 1980. So it's been a minute.
Yeah, me too.
You
I
know,
graduated in 1982.
all right.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think? Um, how do you like? Has this been? For me, it's been a concern. Like I remember, like at age 21, um, and I'm wondering since if this happened to you at age 21, it sounds like you were in a progressive environment. But um, I just remember when I was 21, or
in
I
high
was in
school,
Montreal, and I just had this like feeling that we were going to self-destruct as a that the path that we were on was, like in I had just made a film about the red shoes, the Hans Christian Andersen story, and I did an experimental film. Actually, I think I got the idea for the film that night, and I was on mushrooms, magic mushrooms, in a punk rock club in the Foufou Electrique in Montreal. And it was a time when people were wearing mohawks, and like it was very dark, and and I walked home alone like at 3 a.m. and everyone looked like little rats scuttling in the rain, and I just felt this sense of that we were all very alienated from each other. I didn't feel this connection that we Aquarians like always try to create, right? Like let's all stand around and hold hands.
yeah,
But
I was in a very different space at that age. I had gone into the Air Force at 17.
ah,
Yeah, and I was working on radar there,
wow.
and then when I got out, I wasn't really suited for that kind of regimented life. Let's just say the least.
I was going to say
But
you
I
had to do
loved the
a lot more.
technology side and the planes. All right,
Right.
so that was a plus. So when I got out, I ended up going back to my hometown in Beloit, Wisconsin. Now, at that age, I was, early 20s, and I am um, living in a state where the drinking age is 18, and all the surrounding states, the drinking age is 21.
Right.
And so, guess what? In that little area, there are probably 8 or 9 dance clubs at that time where you could go out and have a few drinks and yeah, I mean, it was the height of like disco and all kinds of dance music at that time. So I was having kind of a fun time back then, hitting the dance clubs, and I wasn't really too serious about life at that. I had just gotten out of that tightly wound box called the Air Force, and I kind of went
Right.
boing like that for
Yeah.
a little while, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I
And
can.
and then to top it off, that was that was kind of like when we were still in that recession in the early 80s too. And so a young guy out of the military with no real civilian job skills in a small town. Like I think at that time the population in Beloit was 35,000 and the town next door, Janesville, was 50. All
Hmm.
right. And I, when the recessions hit, the small towns get hit the hardest, the fastest, and recover the longest and slowest. And so at that time, it was like somebody had to practically die before you could get a job. You know,
Really? I
yeah,
don't
it was pretty bad.
I don't remember that it wasn't like that in Canada.
It was like that. It was like that around here. And as a young male with no children, I mean, they had very little social resources either. So I mean, it was like whatever odd jobs I could find. I had a little part-time gig for a while doing cleanup at a Frito-Lay plant
Oh boy.
in Beloit, and eventually it just got so bad that I left and I hitchhiked down to Dallas, Texas,
Oh cool.
and went down there. And of course, in the big city, the next day I had a job. It's just a
Yes.
much bigger job market, you
Yes.
know.
For sure.
So it
Yeah,
was,
maybe. I mean, I was in Montreal, so maybe it was, and I was, I was probably working in cafes or restaurants or bars. So that,
yeah.
and Montreal was a big city, so there was always work to be had there. But at that night, I just remember going back to my apartment where I was sharing an apartment with some Quebecois people and who are my Quebecois family. Um, and I thought, I'm not entering the house until I figure out how do we live on this planet without self-destroying. And and I cried my eyes out the whole night. Like it was raining, and I just cried and cried. And I thought, I'm not going in the house till I figure this out. And then the cat came to the door, and it was probably like 4 or 5 a.m. And the cat meowed, and then I just had this like, it's unconditional love. That's how we, you know, that's how we bring balance, is by unconditional love. And then I started getting really interested in um, you know meditation and reading about prophecies about like 2012. So I started reading spiritual books about astrology and what these times are that we're in. And when I was in film school in 1987, it was the harmonic convergence, and I shot my film that the week before, and the actress knew about the harmonic convergence. So we shot all night, and in the morning when the sun was coming up, we walked to the top of Mount Royal, and about 10 or 11 of us from the crew who wanted to do this, we stood in a circle and we were like, oh, this harmonic convergence, we're gonna like the 1111, the portal to higher consciousness. And um, so it's been a long time I've been hearing about these times that we're in, and I was really excited to get here. And now that we're here, I'm like, I feel like I have the skills to help people get over the fear, because I followed a spiritual path, and I knew that to survive these times, one had to develop their intuition. So I began at that age, like age 21. How do you develop your intuition? And so I think it's really exciting the times that we're in, even though it feels very unpredictable as well.
That is to say the least, but there's a lot of Uranus involved. So, so yeah, unpredictable is going to be definitely part of the picture. Yeah, for me, it was very different in my 20s. in my 20s, I was kind of a little all over the place. And I was in southern Wisconsin for a while, and then I wound up in Dallas, Texas for about 4 years. And you want to talk about conservative, that's a whole nother
Mm,
world down there. Even though it's a big city. So, and I was pretty much all about work. Um, Came back up to Wisconsin in '88, like February of '88, and was just trying to make my way in work, and I was focused on that. 90, I stood in 1990. Yeah, that was an interesting year. I was working at a small factory in Illinois, and it got closed down and completely permanently. So we went through that whole layoff thing, and I had quite a day. My girlfriend went into labor with
oh,
my son, and I got called to the office, and well, I got called to the office and told at noon, like right around lunchtime, we're gonna be closing the plant in 2 weeks, and we're laying everybody off in two
oh my
weeks.
God.
And then about 1:30 in the afternoon, I got called to the office again, and your girlfriend's in labor up in Wisconsin. You need to drive back up there and get up there now. Same day.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a quite
So
a rite of passage.
quite a bit. Yeah, yeah. So I wound up getting a job working weekends, doing maintenance work in a small hospital on the weekend, and going to school full time during the week for aircraft electronics. Like I was refreshing my skills in that, and this time I was very serious about it. I mean, being a brand new father and everything like that, I took it extremely seriously and put everything into it. And then that wound me up working in telecommunications. But after about my third or fourth year in telecommunications, I went into to being the third shift guy in downtown Chicago. Right, so I was working the night shift from Christmas of right around sometime in late 1999 all the way through Christmas of 2014. And
Wow.
working on that night shift, it puts your mind in a very different frame. You're walking around downtown in a big city at night when most of the ants have left the hive,
Yes.
okay? And you live kind of a little bit in a little bit more of a kind of a dark mystical world,
Mm.
you know what I mean? And I got very deep into poetry during that time. Um, I published a lot of poetry online,
Oh,
and
great.
that that definitely gets into the intuitive side of things, and that's when I started, doing lectures and stuff, not presenting, but listening to, going to lectures and stuff at the Theosophical Society because we lived 20 minutes from their U.S. headquarters. And, and I started learning about shamanism at that time. And, um, so it, I, it was a very different time for me. But, I think part of the reason why we have that divergence in past between the two of us is most of my stellium is in the sixth house,
Oh, in
which
which?
is work and service, right?
Oh, interesting.
And there's a couple of them that a couple of the planets in the stellium in the fifth house. So little bit of fun, lots and lots and lots of work.
Right, right.
And I wound up working, like 60, 70, 80 hour weeks.
Hmm.
Lots and lots of overtime, weekends, holidays, night shifts, all that kind of stuff. Just work, 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 and
Are,
squish the artistic side into a little pillbox,
oh,
But
Dan,
I
there's the.
stuffed a lot in there, I'm telling you.
Oh man, you gotta let that artist out.
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of it when I was younger. I was very much a drawer, self-taught drawer. I learned to draw from reading comic books as a little kid, so that's what my drawing style is, very much like that. Now, I haven't really taken it much in the way of formal art courses, but I'm actually pretty good at it. Just yeah, and I think I get that from my dad's side. He's got it in spades. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, he was when he was working, he started off out of high school as a draftsman at a paper mill machinery company and worked his way up to a senior mechanical engineer. And I've seen some of his artwork. And I've got a nephew on my dad's side who's a really, really good artist too. So it runs in the family a bit.
Well, that's funny because my father was a draftsman as well, and he became a commercial artist, and then did worked in the ads, like Mad Men kind of era,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
where he met my mom in Toronto, and then he when I was seven, my no, when I was nine, my parents divorced, and he married an artist who ran a store, a gallery. They had a gallery, an art store. Um, so it was, yeah, and then he did more fine art, like his own work, abstract work, and I definitely love abstract art myself. Like when I do art myself, it's usually very abstract. But as a filmmaker, I mean, I have a movie brain. Everything, like every place I go, I'm like, oh, that'd be good for a scene of something. Like I'm imagining stories that are happening, or I see people in the street. Oh, that'd be a good character for. And all my dreams at night, I'm like making movies or acting in movies.
That sounds fun.
And I'm also, the other thing I'm always dreaming about is circuses, and I do a lot of backflips in my dreams, which I cannot do in person. And I do a lot of really big performance art, like kind of David Bowie style. Like recently, I was hoisted up in a giant, like Russian doll mummy kind of figure in a dream, right? And I was hoisted up by my feet by this huge crane on top of a building, and then it like set me up on top of the building, and then I opened out of this like Russian doll mummy kind of figure, and then I started doing flips, and I was like bounced on a tightrope in between buildings, and people were clapping. So I definitely I love performing, but I also love the visualizing the movie and the sound and the audio track as well. And I love music. Um, my mother's side, there was a lot of music, so that's also been a part of my life. I play guitar and I sing and I write music as well. Um, but I don't know about you, but I find being an Aquarian, it's hard to focus because I like doing so many things that I get, should I become a singer? Should I become an actress? Should I become a filmmaker? And I'm still trying to figure out what I should be.
My wife has often called me the man with a thousand hobbies.
Oh,
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested in like everything. I swear sometimes I think I'm meant to just live my life on this planet, absorb all knowledge, and then go back to wherever I came from.
yeah, I feel like that too. I really do. I feel like I
Yeah,
just came here to learn
yeah,
and learn as much as I could. And this whole money making thing is really
it's a
putting a
drag. To
stick
put
in
it
my
in
wheel.
60s terms, it's a drag.
But
I
I've learned how to live, as I say, on a wing and a prayer. But now at 59, I'm like, okay, I need to get serious about building something that's, you know, going to generate some income for my next.
Self-sustaining, yeah, right,
Yeah,
for our later years. Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah,
understand that sentiment entirely.
yeah.
It's in the back of my mind. This is one of the reasons why I drive so hard to get all these IT certifications because, in in the corporate world, being over 50 is makes life difficult. Yeah, and I think technology is one of the few areas where you can get around that. But back to the whole capitalist thing, being an Aquarian with the stellium I have, I've for years thought that we need to migrate to something that I call Techism, right? We've heard of socialism, we've heard of capitalism, we've heard of communism, we've heard of fascism. Well, we need a new ism. We need a new
What
ism.
is techism?
And Techism is a concept that I thought up on my own. And what it is basically you use technology and all the computers and resources that we have nowadays to allocate resources where they need to go instead of based on money, based on need science and ecological science.
Mm.
And instead of people having to make money, they just, live wherever they need to live. And the ones that don't really want to do anything to contribute to society, well, they give them their little baseline life and let them live it. And the rest of us that actually want to go out and do things, we're now free of the constraints of having to go where we can sell ourselves to where we can actually apply those higher skills. You
Well,
see,
I think that's where it's going, Dan.
I think long term it will, but I think we're at really, really, really the early stages of the transition. But I think that this whole pandemic is kind of putting a boot in the pants of the old school capitalism. It's kind of like throwing a bowling ball down the lane and it's knocking off the first few pins. You know what I mean? It's not a 10-pin strike yet. It's not that.
Yeah, and we are in the we're fully in the. I mean, we're not in the dawning. We're in the Aquarian Age, and the technology is just going to change and evolve so quickly. You
Oh, it's
know,
nonstop now. It's definitely
yeah,
nonstop. But keep in mind,
yeah,
the Aquarian Age has just started in the last 60 years, basically, and it's 2,200 years. So we're not smack dab in the middle of it by any means. This is going
right,
to be centuries
yeah,
of an Aquarian-centered world, whereas before we were in a Piscean world, the symbol of the fish, and all that Christianity and Fisher of Men and um, all that type of stuff, but we're kind of in all the mysticism and stuff like that. And it doesn't mean all that stuff is going away, but it's going to transform, and it's going to
right,
transform in an Aquarian direction.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
which means lots of technology, brightness, brilliance, humanitarianism, all those kinds of things. So don't be surprised when when progressivism and artistry and all those things come much more to the forefront. As I think automation at first is going to be painful. I think all this automating jobs is going to be kind of painful at first because we're stuck in this capitalist society right now. But I think it might be the thing that finally kicks that orange pip out. It's um, automation is going to eventually free people up to be human and bring out that artistic and big thinker side. The ones that are able to do so. And the
yeah.
ones that don't want to, well, then they don't have to. They won't have to much do anything if they don't want to. And
Well, I just hope it
eventually.
doesn't become. Did you ever see the movie Idiocracy?
No, I remember the title, but it's not one of those movies I got to see.
Oh, you have to see it. It shows the kind of the the full shadow side of this AI automatic world of high tech, but where the people don't evolve because they're so dumbed down from technology. And anyways, it's not a pretty sight, and that's like the shadow side of the Aquarian is age is if we go too much in technology and we don't remain connected to the earth, then we're going to destroy, our what we live on. And um, I remember reading back in the 80s about the Hopi people. The prophecy of the Hopi people was, you know, we must return to the path of the heart. If we don't, it'll go the way of technology. But if we don't stay connected to the path of the heart and the earth, we will self destruct. So I like to be optimistic, and at the same time, I'm not Pollyanna-ish, but I like to think that there's always something that's evolving, and I want to be on the side of evolution rather than, you know, devolution, devolving.
I think that Hopi prophecy has got a lot to it, and I think when they're talking about going the way of the heart, I think that we really, as a society, and we need to become more compassionate. We need to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks. We need to make sure that the vocal minority that is fooled by all this let them sink or swim kind of mentality. I think we need to make sure that that mentality does not win out. We don't need to go back to the law of the jungle. We need to go back to the law of love, joy, and how do I want to put it? I think there's plenty for all if we just do the right things and take care of the earth and start moving beyond the earth. Because as soon as we move beyond the earth, not necessarily exactly what Elon Musk is doing, but something along those lines. We have to expand out into the solar system to make more territory, so we stop squishing so many into such a small planet. You
Hmm.
know, and you kind of get what where I'm going there.
I don't
Um,
know if I agree with you, Dan.
but I think we need to do it. We need to do it in ways that are compassionate. I definitely think that we have to do that long term. But there's a lot more than I want to talk about in this video yet. I might have to come to you on a private discussion for some help with some of the how do I get this out visually, a certain idea that I have. And I'm going to want to talk to you. And this is probably the engineering genes that come down from my dad's side, because my grandfather was always building, making, doing stuff, and I tend to see mechanical solutions, only not little small ones, great big ones,
Right? Yeah,
right?
you have a
So,
cosmic perspective.
right, because I think there's a way we can have this planet and not necessarily live right on it,
Interesting.
and let the planet go back to nature without actually having to leave. So
Oh, that's
I will save that
interesting.
for another
Well,
video, but we can have a private conversation about that after. That's
oh,
not
well, we can talk about it, bring it to the public. I think it's interesting.
well. I want to. I before I make that whole idea public, I want to make it a visual presentation that actually conveys the full idea rather
Oh,
than trying to do it just verbally because number one, I'm much more of a textual communicator than I am. I'm much better communicating in writing than I am verbally.
me too.
Or in other words, I'm visual,
Me too.
right? Writing is visual,
Yeah.
right? And I'm a visual communicator. My art is a very strong side in drawing and stuff like that. And what I want to do, you remember that little short movie that was going around the internet about what 10, 15 years ago called The Story of Stuff? Do you remember ever seeing that? Where it
Um,
was like these little stick figures and it showed like how stuff went into. Look that up sometime. It's
okay,
not
I
very long.
don't
It's like not even 10 minutes long, but it's so powerful in what it does.
know.
I want to take this idea and present it in a visual fashion similar to what they did there.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay? And I don't care if it's little whiteboard drawings, but like
Well, there's doodly.
yeah, something along that line, and I need to learn how to use that after I get my next cert. I'm on a deadline for that.
I
Yeah,
signed up for doodly, and I haven't. I signed up for so many courses this year that I haven't had time to explore yet. Doodly is on one of the stuff there.
that's one of the things that our stellium loves for us to do is to spread ourselves way too thin.
Well, it's funny because today I was meditating with my husband down at the lake, and um, I had this when I had my eyes when I was meditating. I had this feeling of being formless, and I felt like I was just like the consciousness of like just consciousness, seeing my eyes, but I'm seeing pictures in my head. But I felt like my body had like my atoms had disappeared. Like I was like formless in the space by the lake. And I just thought, like, talk about spreading yourself too thin, right?
Well, almost literally right there. To me, it sounds like you were doing a little bit of astral projection there.
Well, I do go into trance and I do go into that altered state quite easily. And I've been meditating for 30 years on a daily basis. So I've had some very unusual experiences, physical feelings, messages that I've received. And for me, meditation is really key to managing living on Earth at this time because otherwise, it's too crazy. I have to go into that meditative space, and it's like a very it's just become very comfortable for me. So it's like I just go there right away.
Yeah. And I've always wanted to be able to do that more, but when I try, I fall asleep. Hello, sixth house, making me work so many hours.
Now my stellium is in my third house, which is Mercury.
Third house, all right, let me look this one up because I don't, and one of the things that I'm weak on in astrology is what the houses are. I know what the
Oh, me
houses are
neither.
that are hitting me, but I need to look that up. So
I'm
let me
in the
take a look real quick.
supposed to be the third house.
All right.
I met with Pascal. He said I had some planets in the fourth house too, but I don't know what that means.
Okay,
I don't know
astrological
why. Maybe.
houses. Okay, let's see if this is a good reference for this. No, I might need to get back to more the wiki houses. Third house on astrology.com. All right, so I'm gonna pop back over to Zoom real quick, and then I'll do a share screen so you can see what I'm looking at here. Let's do that for right now. Okay, so third house, you're probably seeing this now, Andrea.
Yes.
The house of communication,
Mm,
commonly referred to as the house of communication. In this house, much of the communication is going between the individual and those he or she holds close, brothers, sisters, as well as neighbors. Let's get rid of that. Um, yeah,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yep,
And
yeah.
writing is something that well, I feel like my whole life I've been trying to self express.
All right.
And, you know, it's the third house is, I guess, expression.
And house of family and home is the fourth house. All right. So there we go.
Yeah, most of my planets are in the third house.
Yeah, with you said a little bit in the fourth house. All right, so we're going to stop the screen share and go back to Zoom, but you got the idea. So film, communication, writing, plays, art, those are all methods of communications that humans use.
Yes.
So it makes a lot of sense that you would go in that direction. A
Well,
lot.
I'm actually writing my memoir right now, and it's called I Am Dragonfly. See the dragonfly?
Mm-hmm.
So, dragonfly is my spirit insect, my totem, and my spirit name and my film company is dragonflyfilms.ca.
Oh,
And
that is so cool.
when I was making my documentary film, The Sacred Run, The Lotus and the Feather, about peace and environmental awareness with Native American Indians, and we ran in Japan um, for raising awareness. So that when I made that film, Dragonfly came to me and landed right here and stayed there for about 20 minutes. And then I was at an Ainu festival in the northern part of Japan in Hokkaido. And I was singing on a stage, playing my guitar, and dragonflies were all around my microphone. And then one landed on my microphone. I was actually singing a Joni Mitchell song, Circle Game.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
when the dragonfly landed on my microphone, it looked super huge, you know? And then the next morning I was laying on the ground and another dragonfly came here and I you might think I'm crazy, Dan, but you probably won't because you're an Aquarian. But I felt an energetic transference, like a vibrational transference. It was like a frequency that I felt like it was like I could feel the energy of the dragonfly in my third eye. And then I uh, named my film company Dragonfly Films because Dragonfly is all about the heaven and the earth, spirit and matter. And I feel like my whole life has been about finding that balance between spirit and matter. And how do we maintain that balance between spirit and matter? We're spiritual beings in a physical body, and how do we live on earth in a balanced way? And so the memoir I'm writing is called I Am Dragonfly, and I'm going to write about my spiritual journey leading up to my film. I went to India for 6 months when I was 29, and yeah, just hoping to raise awareness that we're all one. Basically that's my message: is we are all one. And when I think when people have the consciousness that we are all interconnected, then we don't poison the water. We don't hurt each other, because we know if I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. It's like, because
Right.
it's all connected.
On the most simple level, The wind doesn't know anything about state lines or international boundaries. The water doesn't know anything about state lines or international boundaries. These are lines that human beings drew on paper and on digital representations on computers, but they don't exist in the real world. They're something we created, and they're boxes in our own mind. And and there's nothing on Earth except for human beings that has any clue what an international boundary or a state boundary is. So these are artifices of the human mind, and they change because societies don't stay the same, right? We don't stay in stasis. And just like you might had an image of the United States from the 1940s, right after World War II, that's very different than the image of the United States, say, right around 2019. And the way the United States was behaving at that time versus what they were doing back in the 40s. It's a very different thing, and that's just this one country, and doesn't matter. I mean, think of think of the reactor at Fukushima. That's still in an ongoing state of meltdown,
That
and
was yesterday. It was, yeah,
right,
2011 yesterday.
yeah, and it's like 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, and that's still an ongoing crisis. And
Oh,
and that doesn't know anything about national boundaries. It doesn't care if you live on the other side of the planet. Uh, you know, nature doesn't have all these conventions that we came up with. We
mm,
had best learn that all the world is one if we want to be one with the world.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, I think when 2011, when that happened, um, because when I did the run, it was 1995. And in 1995, there was a lot of talk of in the First Nation community. There was a lot of sharing. Well, I was exposed around that time. They've been talking about it for centuries or whatever. But um, I was learning about the white buffalo calf woman and how that we were all being we're in the seventh we're the in the seventh generation of the rainbow people, and this is like the awakening, because there was a prophecy that all nations would come together, and that's my film, The Sacred Run, The Lotus and the Feather, is about that concept that they spoke of, that there would come a time when all nations would come together. And since I made the film, like, it took me 9 years to make the film, because and when I made the film, Peace and Environmental Awareness in 1995 was not a priority or very interesting to anybody that I was trying to sell it to. Very few people were like interested. And then I finished it in 2001, and then I thought it would do well, but September 11th happened, so I thought, well, it'll do well because it's about peace. But there was a whole focus on war, and they were
Mm,
like fascinated with. There were so many. Ken Burns made the film about the World War I, World War II. We started focusing, like, what happened in these wars? How did we get here? And looking at the history of war. But the concept of peace is still a relatively. It takes a lot of people to keep standing for peace, and not fighting for peace. We have to stand for peace. We have to be like Gandhi, and like you say, more compassion. But it's it takes a long time, but I think these events like Fukushima, um, when I was living in Japan, there was the Kobe earthquake, and the what came of that was people that were, suddenly their whole world was turned upside down. They realized their neighbors would help them, and people started helping each other. And even though, these terrible things that happen, there's always a part of me like more compassion is being born right now out of these, uh, you know, horrific situations like the pandemic is waking so many people up, right?
Yeah, you have to wonder why it takes a disaster for people to be kind to one another. You know what I mean? It seems like on the small scale, uh, it doesn't seem like it's too much of an issue for, like one person to be kind to another on a small scale. But on the large scale, why can't we do more like what we're doing now, helping other people and coming together and trying to figure out across national boundaries how to deal with this pandemic? Why can't we get more cooperation? Yeah, and to me, it all boils down back to this capitalist system that we have because really, why do we even have wars in the first place? It's wars over resources and it's wars over resources for companies, not resources for people.
Right.
And I really see it in those terms. And there's another reason why we need to transcend all these old isms. We do. We need to come about some way of making sure that resources are allocated based on human need and not on paper people need, which is what I call corporations.
Right. Right. So all get rid of all isms except techism, right?
There you go. Use technology to allocate resources fairly and based on where people need things and where they're not going to do damage to the environment. I mean, we've got the technology now to be able to do stuff like this. And it's only going to be more capable by the time we finally wrap our heads around it.
Well, the truth is we've had the technology for way before, like Buckminster Fuller in the early 1900s was way ahead and had all kinds of permaculture and electric cars, and I love Buckminster Fuller and Tesla. I mean, we know how to have we have the technology to build free energy, but the corporations don't want us to have access to that.
Well, economics that's one side of capitalism that's actually working in our favor because the economics of renewable energy are definitely pushing fossil fuel energy out the window over
Yay.
time. I mean, nuclear energy is becoming less and less economically viable even under the current system, and the same thing is true of fossil fuels. And you're going to see over time. I mean, wind and sun are free. You don't have to pay for those. You don't have to dig them out of the ground. All you got to do, it takes so little time to put up a wind turbine or solar panels compared to building a huge fossil fuel power plant or a nuclear
Right.
reactor. I mean, it's a much smaller upfront investment. The biggest impediment we have, and I've been blogging on renewable energy since the early 2000s, so I've kind of been, aside from everything else, this has been a kind of a passion of mine. And the biggest impediment that we have globally to renewable energy isn't necessarily where to put the turbines or where can we get the sun from or any of that kind of stuff. It's where the population centers are and where the power production would be best suited to be sited, which we already know, and the transmission lines to get the power from where is the best place to generate the power to where do we need to use it. our transmission grid is in the United States. The transmission grid was really designed back in the like 1930s and 1940s, and the technology has not really been very much improved upon since then. It's not. It's designed for these big ginormous single point generating stations, as in fossil fuel, coal plants, gas plants, and nuclear plants. And it's not designed to do what you need to do with renewable energy, which is when the sun stops shining over here, the wind kicks up and the turbines start blowing over there, and you need to transfer very rapidly from this generating to that generating. You need to be able to switch,
Mhm.
right? And you need to do that all over the grid. We have the computers to do it now, but the grid's not capable of doing that kind of switching, that rapid switching to keep the load balanced to the
Now,
generation.
I've always thought that if we had more localized distribution rather than these big, like if we had smaller, like each community had solar or wind or, geothermal, could
That
so
that
we're not
that's
reliant on the big grid that fails us.
well, there's a problem. There's a problem with that kind of thinking. Um, in a sense, partially that's correct. Yes, it's good to have microgrids and it's good to have local generation, but keep in mind that weather patterns tend to impact um, a smaller geographical region, not just one house, right? You, your whole your whole town is, or even your whole state is covered by a weather system, right? Versus just your house isn't covered by a storm. Half your state's probably covered by a storm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
And
if you also,
and Texas is a good case in point. What happened in Texas in just the last few months is a
Mhm.
good case in point. All right, here's some of the things that happened in Texas. All right, in Texas, first of all, they do not have a connection to the rest of the national power grid. Texas is its own power grid by itself.
Mhm.
There's the Western United States grid, the Eastern United States grid, and Texas.
Right.
All right. So when their power generation went down in Texas, they couldn't import power from the Eastern United States or the Western United States because they disconnected decades ago. Right, so they couldn't balance that load out with the rest of the grid. They had no other resources to draw on. This is where having a big intermesh grid nationally is a really good idea,
Mhm.
because if the power generation stops in one area, you can import power from another area where the generation's still going strong and not wind up with a disaster like what you had.
Right.
All
Right.
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 And the other problems that happen in Texas, all right, is they had a shortage of natural gas because they didn't have any natural gas stockpiled, because this is like a once in a decade kind of event for them, not a once every year kind of event for
Mm.
them. And so they didn't have a lot of natural gas stockpiled, so they ran out of natural gas because it stayed that cold for a week instead of a couple of days. That's one thing. That's the biggest issue that they had in Texas, other than not being connected to the rest of the national grid. The
Mm.
other issue that they had in Texas is they didn't weatherize any of the energy infrastructure down there. The politicians are all talking about, oh, the wind turbines froze. Well, yeah, okay, that's 5% of what happened to your power grid down there. The other part was the loss of the natural gas. But how come wind turbines work in the Arctic and in Alaska and Wisconsin and Minnesota and
Right.
Illinois and Indiana and all up there? Because they winterized everything.
Right. It's
They
no
have
longer.
de-icing systems. I mean, just like an aircraft. I mean, it goes up high in the sky where it's cold. They have to de-ice the wings or the thing
Yeah.
will fall out of the sky, right? And a
Yeah.
wind turbine basically uses big wings to spin itself. They
Right.
have
Right.
to They have to have de-icing systems on the wind turbines. The generators have to have heaters on them so the oil doesn't get thick and freeze up and seize the bearings and stuff. But the same is true of the gas plants and the transformers and all the other stuff that makes up the power grid. When you don't winterize your equipment and you get a week-long cold snap like that, like what you would get in a northern state, well, guess what? You're now you're now back in the Stone Age for a week.
Right. Now, let me ask you. I am interested in also biomass energy and magnetics and geothermal. So if those were also added to the mix, um, I mean, I've heard that magnetics is really, there's a lot of potential with magnetics for energy.
Yeah. Well, magnetics magnetism in itself is really not a way of generating energy on its own, right? You need some other power source working with magnetics. But biomass, that's a great idea. All right.
Yeah.
There is tons and tons and tons of methane that leak into the atmosphere every year and contribute to climate change, that could be used, because it comes from compost, it comes from cattle, it comes from decomposition in the forest,
Yeah,
and it comes from
there's so much shit in the
landfills.
world. We could power the whole world with all the shit.
Almost literally, but that's one piece of the puzzle, and you probably said the best one last, and the technology is getting better and better all the time, and that's geothermal.
Mm.
But we have in the United States alone, right? As soon as you get a few miles offshore, right? The wind is nearly continuous, roughly 50 miles an hour at the height of a large utility scale wind turbine. Look what Britain's been doing in the last 10 years, 15 years with offshore wind. And the United States has something along the lines of 16,000 miles of coastline, 16,000 miles of coastline, and they barely have a turbine in the water. What they probably have 10. Anywhere as far as offshore
Well,
wind, we are lagging down in this
well,
country. And
unfortunately, this country is so divided politically that it's hard to get anything done. It feels like an animal with two heads, and one's trying to go one way and the other's trying to go the other way.
it does, it very much does.
And
And,
sometimes we
and
go to
what's
the left,
sad about it
sometimes we go to the right.
is the United States and Canada are pretty much the Saudi Arabia and UAE of wind.
Yeah,
I mean, we have so much wind energy potential in North America. We could probably power the entire planet a couple of times over just with that.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Compared to what.
it's a subject that fascinates me because I just think that there's so much technology that has been hidden or patented and protected, and they're not letting it out yet. But I think that with the internet, there's a lot of information that people are getting access to that maybe they weren't before, for the good and the bad, right?
Well, you've got a couple of interesting things happening in the internet space right now. Because right now, what you're seeing in the United States is it's labeled like a progressive conservative divide. It's labeled that way in the corporate owned media, and it's kind of baked into our consciousness that way. But what it really is underlying it is much more of a rural urban divide.
Hmm.
Okay. It's much more of a rural setting versus an urban setting. When you look at the way the United States government works, you have all these congressional districts, right? And you have all these different states, right? So the Senate, each state gets two senators. even Steven, everybody, right? So a state like North Dakota with a population of 400,000 gets as many um, you know, many senators as a state like California with a population of 40 million, for
Right.
instance.
Right.
Okay, that is not very democratic.
No.
Yeah,
No.
but
We
also
need to
with all
change
these
the electoral.
congressional districts, right? These congressional districts, some of these districts might have a population of 1,000 to 10,000 people, and other districts might have a population of 1 million.
Yeah,
And
I think the electoral college vote has got to go, but I don't know how they're going to get rid of it.
that's constitutional stuff, and that's a can of worms.
Yeah.
But still, another subtext to this rural urban divide, what I'm getting at and relating back to what you were saying about the internet, all right, is that broadband is scarce to non-existent in rural areas.
Mm,
All right, there is very little and very poor internet connectivity once you get out of the big urban population centers
mhm.
right now. Right now. All right, but then you've got something like Starlink going on. That's the SpaceX satellites for
Yeah,
broadband
I think
internet.
I saw it up in the sky. Is that possible? It
Yeah,
looked very strange.
it is totally possible. Here's the thing. All right, with old school satellite internet, those satellites, there's only a few of those satellites, and they're parked in what's called a geostationary orbit, so that they're spinning at the same time the Earth is spinning, so they seem to be over the same spot on the Earth. In order for that synchronization of rotation to happen, they have to be 22,500 miles up. So your internet traffic going to that satellite has to go 22,500 miles up, 22,500 miles down to get to the other end, and the reply has to go 22,500, 22,500. You're making what, an 88, 89, 90,000 mile round trip, right? Right? The satellites that Elon Musk is putting up, they're not like that. They're going around and around and around, but they're 180 to 350 miles up. So your internet goes up 180, down 180, back up 180, and down 180. So you're talking what, about 600 mile trip
It's
versus
pretty
an
amazing.
80, 90,000 mile trip. And
It
the
still boggles
satellites
my
that he's
mind.
putting up, the last couple of batches of satellites that he's putting up, have direct satellite to satellite laser links, so that if this satellite over here is not in view of a ground station to communicate with the ground, it can relay through another satellite and down.
Cool.
All right, so they're starting to get traditional satellite internet has, because of that huge up down, has been like really long delays, what's called latency in networking. It
Hmm.
takes forever for the send and reply to get done in internet time, whereas the satellite links through like Starlink, they have a latency very similar to terrestrial fiber optic. And when they get all of those satellites up there, they're going to have global broadband coverage equivalent to what the cities have now.
Mm.
Anywhere, I don't care if you're on the South Pole, the North Pole. Um, Now, the only place you might have a little fun is the moon, but anywhere on the planet, doesn't matter what part of what country you're in. You're gonna, if you've got a transceiver capable of talking to those satellites, you're going to have broadband on the order of probably gigabit
Hmm.
broadband.
So I have a question for you.
Hmm?
Where do all my photos go in the cloud, and where is the cloud?
Right up my alley. All right.
How does that work?
This is what I did for a living for 21 years. All right. All the cloud is these big 8, 9 foot tall racks that are about as little wider than my shoulders, and there's this tray of hard drives, 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 and these big data centers. They're like big office buildings, like one or two or three or five floors of an office building, filled up with racks and racks and racks of hard drives and servers. And there's data centers like that scattered all over the world, in big cities all over the world. And where all your files go in the clouds, they go through the internet and go onto one of those hard drives, and then they get mirrored to about five other hard drives in five other cities.
Wow.
And that's what the cloud is. It's a bunch of servers and hard drives in big data centers all over the planet. And it's just on the other side of the internet. There is no, it's not like some cloud wrapped around the top of Mount Olympus. It's just like look at some office tower in downtown Chicago. I bet you there's at least a floor worth of data center in it somewhere with a bunch of servers and hard drives in it, you know. That's it.
Well,
That's all it
I'm
is.
even amazed that this is happening. I'm speaking to you, and with the distance, and we're seeing each other while we speak, and we're recording it at the same time. It's just amazing, really amazing.
Yeah.
But I think we could go on, but I do have to call my mother before 10 o'clock, so I feel like um, we should wrap it up.
We
And
are kind of getting there. Why don't I go ahead and why don't we kind of say our official goodbye, and then I'll kill the recording, and we can kind of
oh,
talk for just a minute or two on amongst ourselves. All right. So everyone, Dan Stafford, Hyper Aquarian 1962, out of here. Peace, long life. May there never be a rogue wave in your coffee mug. People from my other YouTube channel know that one. And
and
Andrea, I'll hand it over to you.
I am Dragonfly. Oops, there. I am Dragonfly, and my name is Andrea Sadler, and my film company is dragonflyfilms.ca, and I also currently lead women's circles, monthly women's circles at Dragonfly Circles and Retreats on Facebook. And that's to create a safe space for women to be seen, heard, and valued. And each month we discuss a different theme, and it's the idea of women supporting women to rise up in our empowerment and be divine feminine leaders.
Awesome. And on that note, you can find a bunch of us Super Aquarians at Ushers of the Aquarian Age .com and Ushers of the Aquarian Age.org.
These